What's up, builder family? Thank you for clicking on this video. You did already see the thumbnail, so you know what we're working on. It is a modern desk. I used a lot of different techniques to get this project done, but I'm happy to show you and take you along on this journey. So please make sure you like and subscribe and come and check out how I turned some reclaimed lumber into a beautiful desk that'll be timeless. Thanks again, and let's get into this build. Before I get started in the shop, I always do a 3D model. This helps me out with materials, right? If I'm working with a client, this is going to make sure that they understand the design that they're getting in their custom piece of furniture. So this is what I always do. This is the design for this piece, so you can kind of visualize what we're going for within this project. This build started with me at the planer. I needed to get all of this old stain and finish off these oak boards. So these were still solid oak, red oak boards. So just needed to knock off that old finish. So just ran them through the planer. Some of them I did have to sand, but not a big deal. Just sanded off a little bit of that finish, ran them through the planer. Then I was able to move into the next step, which was layout. All of these boards were different lengths and sizes, so I really had to be a little meticulous here to figure out which boards need to go where. Once I got that all lined up, it was easy for me to go ahead and cut them to size, and then I could prepare for glue up. Once I got them cut, I needed to figure out kind of the orientation I wanted the boards. Which direction should the grain be going? Which boards put together, look the best. So um, just went ahead and did that. Kind of took a little bit of flipping and dipping, but we got there in the end. And as you can see, those gaps are pretty tight. Can't really see the boards, and they look like one solid piece together once you glued them up. So really happy with how those came out. After the glue up, there was a little bit of chisel work that I had to do. Not a ton, but I did need to do a little bit to clean the boards up and then kind of move over to sanding. So used a combination of the sander and hand tools to get it nice and flat and looking good. And this is just a quick clip to show what the finished panel looked like. Really happy with how it came out. I did put a little bit of wood filler in some spots, but overall came out really nice. After this step, I needed to mock up cutting these to rough length, right? So I did want to dial this cut in on the table saw, but just kind of get to rough length. This is how I do. I don't have a track saw currently, so I just line up my straight edge, and I run my circular saw along that straight edge. Just make sure that's nice and straight. It's about 1.5 inches from the line is where I actually need to cut. So just measure that, throws a few clamps on there, and it's all good. I can just run my circular saw along that straight edge. Gives me a nice clean cut. Now that I have a nice clean cut on one edge, the other edge needs to be a miter. So this is for the cabinet specifically, and just because that cabinet has a miter on the top, I need two sides to have miters. So I know you saw them sparks. I don't know what's going on there. It does that sometimes. There was no metal in the board, so I think it's just something with my saw I probably need to look into a little bit more. But just cut those through, cut the miter, and then I was able to start kind of assembling and gluing up the cabinets. So this was very essential. I needed to take my time and make sure this cut was nice and clean. But once I got those done, I could go ahead and jump into assembly. I'm not gonna lie, I wrestled with these boards. I didn't show the whole process, but just know I was fighting for my life with these boards. There's a lot of different ways I could have went about doing this, and lining these boards up, putting them together, and I've realized all of them after the fact. Like none of them would have been more helpful than what I thought of in the end. But anyway, I got these together. As you can see here, I do have clamping squares just to make sure these are square because I am putting drawers in these. So you really want to make sure your cabinets are square. If you're going to be putting drawers in them, they have to be square, right? Or else you're just going to have a really hard time. So got those all squared up, clamped, and was able to let the glue dry. So once that glue dried, we were good. But just know I was fighting for my life with these cabinets. It was crazy. Terrible strategy in putting these together. It's my first time gluing up cabinets with miters like this, so a lot of different ways Most ideal would probably be where you see that red clamping square, putting that on the floor probably would have been the most ideal. Really anything. Putting it on a workbench, on a work table, something. Anything would have been better than what I did. So just learn from my mistakes, please. After I got done wrestling with the cabinets, I could then move on to the face frame. So the face frame of these cabinets is also going to be solid wood, and I wanted to miter these, right? So all of these around the edges are mitered. So I just had to line up the mitered edges, figure out what looked good. And this is kind of the strategy I did. Took a lot of the thinking out of it. Just cut one, made sure it was perfect, and then cut the other. So there's two long sides and two shorter sides. So just lining up the two long sides and just kind of taking a little bit off at a time until sneaking up on that measurement. And once I got locked in on that measurement, I went ahead and pushed it all the way through. Nothing too crazy, but did want to make sure those miter gaps are perfect. And then here I'm just kind of putting those together, making sure the measurements line up because I want my face frame to also be square, not only the cabinet. On the front, I also wanted to do a little chamfer design on the front, so I ended up just taking that off. You could do this with a router, but I didn't have a router bit this big, so I just went ahead and did it on the table saw. Just angled that blade, took off a cool little piece, and I could move on to the legs and the stretchers of the cabinet. If my table saw could talk right here, it would be saying something crazy. Like the motor was just screaming, "Help me, help me, help me, please." Because it's really hard to find wood boards that are this thick, I ended up having to glue together three boards that I had to get to the final thickness for the legs. So I'm just cutting this to rough length. I'm trying to cut off those rough edges and kind of reveal the boards together. So gluing them and clamping them together, you can't really tell the gap that's there once you cut off this edge. So when you're looking at the edge, you can see it, but once you cut this edge off, you can't. So I ended up dialing this in with my planer, and you'll see that here in a second. But just cutting those to rough length and kind of cutting this rough edge off just so I'm not taking off so much at the planer. Um, that's what I did. And so did one side, flipped it over, did the other side, and then I was able to run it through the planer to really get those measurements flat and perfect. I think I ended up doing 3 inches by 3 inches. So this is probably a little over that, three and a half, three and a quarter, something like that. But dialed that in with the planer. The reason I love using the planer is because I can select the thickness I want to plane to and just rotate the board 90 degrees, as you'll see me doing here, and it's going to be perfect. This is going to help me remove wood, burn marks, blade curves, plane marks. All of these things are able to come off just running and rotating at 90 degrees. Of course, I am planing the sides that had the most cuts or damages or dings and got those dialed in. So here I am cutting these boards. You can see how nice they came out, but I need to cut them. I believe this was like 6 inches each, but needed to cut these. And so what you see me doing here is I'm using the fence as a stop block, but you don't ever want to use the fence of your table saw and the miter gauge at the same time because the piece of wood is going to get pinched between the fence and the blade, and it's going to kick back and it'll throw the board at you, and it's a bad day. Don't ask me how I know, but it's a bad day. So the way I get around doing it is I set my fence, I get my piece, and I run it all the way up against the fence. And then you can see me moving the fence out. So you don't need a ton of space. You need at least an inch, I would say. So just dial in the measurement, butt that piece up against the fence, hold it tight to your miter gauge, move your fence over a little bit, run it through, and you're good. I did have a little chamfer that I wanted to put kind of an angle on the boards to just so they're not straight, thick, bulky. You know what I mean? I want to have a little bit of angle to them. So I went ahead and set up a stop block, dialed in that fit, and don't do what you see me doing here. I probably should have stopped the blade to grab that little piece, but I just ran it up, put it up against the stop block, held it tight to the miter, ran it through the saw. And that gave me a nice little profile that I then took over to the router and just kind of edged it over. right? I didn't want these edges to be sharp. This is a piece of furniture, so I didn't want anybody's feet getting caught, you know what I mean, on the bottom of this and getting a splinter or anything crazy. So I just went ahead and hit them with the router. And I did the same to the stretchers, right? So stretchers and feet all got the same, I believe it was a 1/4 inch round over. And this just took off that sharp edge and made it a little bit nicer if you did brush up against it. Once I finished up with the router, it was pocket hole time. So this is how I went about attaching the legs that I just cut to the stretchers, right? So the stretchers get the pocket holes and they screw directly into the legs. So you'll never see these. Easy and quick way to put a base together and very, very strong. So no worries about them holding up the weight of this desk, but you'll see me attach these here in a bit. Once I got done with this, I was able to jump into attaching this desk riser, I could say. So this is how I gave the desk a levitated top look. I just used this board, and this is how I connected the top to the cabinets themselves. I used some pretty long L brackets because it is, inside about 3 inches, but attached this, I glued and screwed it from the inside. I screwed into these boards and glued them also. So got those nice and 90 parallel. You saw me kind of using that square, getting the glue squeeze out because I am going to be staining this piece. So I don't want any glue stuck in there. And the face frame. This right here, clamp is a game changer. So earlier when I said I was fighting with the cabinets, this clamp didn't come in the mail yet. But when it came in for this face frame, I was like, man, I don't know what I was doing. This is what I needed. Take back what I said earlier. This is the most ideal way to glue up miters. So get yourself one of these straps. I'll have this one linked in the description. Pick you up one of these fairly cheap, but it's a game changer. For 90 degrees, I couldn't have asked for anything better. Worked out perfect. And finally, the moment of truth, the base. So this is how I did it. I knew I wanted the base to have a 3/4 inch inset look. So I just used this piece of plywood and one of my parallel clamps. So there's the two legs. And so the stretcher will go on the inside. And so mind you, I line everything up. You can kind of see what this looks like. And once I take this clamp off here in a second, you'll be able to see that 3/4 inch review. So it's just a 3/4 inch piece of plywood. Clamped it down nice so as I start to drive those pocket holes, they stay put. If you know, you know. When you start driving those pocket holes, your whole board is going to move. So it's best to clamp it down. And that's how I did that. So once I got this lined up, I then just needed to put the pocket hole screws in. So I can't remember the exact length of these, but it didn't really matter a whole lot because that piece of wood that I'm driving into is a lot thicker. I was able to really bury these into that wood and make sure it's a nice strong fit. Again, very, very strong. No need to put any glue here. I could have put glue, but because I am staining, I wanted to kind of keep the glue out of it. And this is plenty strong for the base. So no worries there. Came out perfect. I did this about 4 times total. And once I got that, you could kind of see how that turned out. And then I just used the other stretcher to combine 2 of the 4 that I put together. All right, that is going to be a wrap on this first part of this video. So there will be a part 2. Please make sure you like and subscribe so that you're ready for that video when it comes out. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to move that base around a little bit better angle for y'all to see, but it did come out very, very nice. I'm happy with it. And when we get into staining in part 2, you will see how that base came out. So again, make sure you like and subscribe. And until next time, keep building. Peace.